3. Now, Sydney's life is normally filled with chaos and just a normal mother life between balancing a job and taking her kids to soccer practice and to taking her kids to soccer games and to come all the way back home to cook dinner for the rest of the family, do the dishes, put them up, and then in time, take care of everybody's needs. So it wasn't until Sydney started to not feel well that she just was like, she wasn't feeling up to her normal self. She started to not want to take her kids to soccer practice. She didn't want to go to jobs. She didn't want to participate in events that she normally would be thrilled to participate in, but she was just like, I don't feel like it. So Sydney just racked this up to exhaustion because she had been going a lot lately, and she just figured that I was just exhausted. Let me sleep for let me just take a couple days off, sleep, and everything like that, and I'll be fine. Well, it wasn't until Sydney started to cough up blood that her husband knew that something was wrong. So her husband told Sydney that she was going to the hospital, and she was not leaving the hospital until they figured out what was wrong with her. Well, what was wrong with Sydney was a disease called multiple myeloma. Now, multiple myeloma is a cancer in which it's a cancer that affects the blood. So abnormal blood cells enter through the bone marrow, and this prevents the bone marrow from producing healthy blood cells. Now, without healthy blood cells, your body can't function properly, and eventually you do die. So the myeloma does not have a cure for it because it is a disease in the blood. There is treatment, but even with the most conventional treatments, the patients only live a good 3 to 4 years, and then they eventually pass away due to the disease. So, of course, this broke Sydney and her family to smithereens because they just figured there was just something wrong with her, and just treatment would be fine, and she'd be going back to her normal self. So Sydney started to break down, and she started to cry. It wasn't until the doctor said, no, you don't have to cry, you don't have to worry about this, because there is a treatment that you can do that will potentially prolong your life. And this treatment was adult stem cell transplant. Now, what adult stem cell transplant does is it takes the stem cells from your bone marrow and they cycle it into a machine. And what the machine does is it separates the good and bad stem cells. And once the machine has got all the good stem cells, they put it into a vial and they inject it back into your body, and your body can, in a sense, recuperate from the disease that it had. So, but in order for Sydney to get this transplant, she had to go through chemo and radiation therapy. So after she did chemo and radiation therapy, she got the adult stem cell transplant. And within 10 days, Sydney was feeling like her normal, happy, healthy self. She wanted to take her kids to soccer practice. She wanted to go home and take care of her family like she should have. But of course, the doctors didn't recommend this right away because they wanted to make sure that she was fully ready to go back to her way of life. Now Sydney is living a full, happy, healthy, active life, and it is all due to the stem cell transplant that she received. So my name is Emily, and I'm going to be talking about how stem cells benefit the medical community. So some few limitations I'm going to be setting up due to how broad stem cell research and stem cell therapy is. I'm only going to be focusing on the United States, mainly because there are 31 countries currently working on stem cell research and stem cell therapy. So I'm not going to do all 31 of those countries. I'm just going to be focusing on the United States. I'm not going to be defining the value of life because I will be getting into embryonic stem cells and a bunch of other stem cells. I'm not going to define life in all of its essence. And I'm not trying to get stem cell research to have more funding or saying that stem cells can, in fact, replace other treatments. I'm just putting the knowledge out there and letting you all be the deciding factor. So some brief, stem cells were actually discovered in the 1950s when research discovered that bone marrows had, in fact, had stem cells in them. And what they thought back then was that this could be used, in fact, to actually clone people and to help clone the next generation in a sense. But it wasn't until 1968 where they discovered that no, stem cells could be used for something other than cloning, because in 1968, the first successful stem cell bone marrow transplant was initiated by doctors who discovered that they could use this to help treat two siblings with a severe immunodeficiency. And then, of course, jump to 1997, where they discovered that you can use stem cells to clone animals and humans potentially, because using stem cells, they were actually able to clone a lamb from its mother. So to continue on to this, and during the 1990s and the early 200s, they discovered that stem cells can be used to manipulate tissues and to actually help the tissues heal themselves. And then you go into 2005, where you see that stem cells have the ability to be distinguished between other cells. Not only can the stem cells just be stem cells, but they can actually be like liver cells and kidney cells. They can be more than just stem cells themselves. And you can actually and in 2006 that they discovered, research discovered that you can actually reprogram these stem cells to help the body heal. So I'm going to be talking about 3 different ways how stem cells have progressed from the idea of cloning to where it is now to help treat diseases and help treat diseases that we thought couldn't be treated before. I'm going to talk about how no more human experimentation will be needed due to stem cells taking over human experimentation when it comes to drugs, and I'm talking about how it is more cost effective than other drugs. So, how stem cells have progressed. I'm going to talk about how it has progressed from the idea of cloning to the idea where it is now, where it can help cure diseases and it can actually help treat type 1 diabetes. So, how it can help cure diseases? There is a disease called the severe combined immunodeficiency disorder, but it's also referred to as the bubble baby disease. And I'm really going to refer to it as the bubble baby disease, mainly because it's a lot easier to say. So what the bubble baby disease is children are born with a severe depletion or not born with a type of white blood cells that are mainly used to help treat diseases. And so when these children are born and they realize that they have this disease, they're then rushed to a sterile environment where they have to live out their first and unfortunately their last year of their life, due to the fact that they don't have the white blood cells needed to fight off the diseases that are out in the world. So what researchers discovered in the University of California is they could take stem cells and they can use gene therapy along with the stem cells to, in fact, manipulate the white blood cells that are maybe not the lack of white blood cells or not any, or if the child doesn't have any white blood cells, they can use stem cells to actually create white blood cells into the body, to where these children can now live a normal, happy life in the world. They don't have to worry about getting sick because they have the white blood cells that they need to fight off this infection. So another way stem cells can help cure diseases is by cancer. It can help treat cancer. Now, the main form of way that cancer is treated is through chemotherapy. But what people know is that chemotherapy not only kills the cancerous cells, it also kills the healthy cells. But now with stem cell therapy, researchers are discovering that using stem cells, you can act more as a target therapy, where these stem cells go in and they attack the cancerous cells, but they leave the healthy cells alone. So you will no longer have to worry about chemotherapy killing out all of the cells, because stem cell therapy can kill the cancerous cells and then leave the healthy cells alone. So how stem cells can help treat type 1 diabetes? Well, there are ways where you can get implants by using embryonic stem cells. And what this embryonic stem cells do is they, in a sense, help heal the pancreas, where when the immune system comes in and they damage the pancreas, you can, in fact, use stem cells to help heal the pancreas to where the pancreas can now produce its own insulin, and you will no longer have to give yourself insulin shots in order to monitor your blood sugar, because the pancreas can do it for you. And also there's another way. It's called an islet cell transplant. And what this does is it takes cells from a healthy person's pancreas and they put it into a person who has type 1 diabetes. And what this does is the islet cells help monitor your blood sugar, and it helps lower your blood sugar to where you may have to inject yourself with insulin, but it will not be once or twice. It may not be as frequently as you need it. And in some cases, researchers have discovered that after an islet cell transplant, people with type 1 diabetes no longer have to take injections for insulin, because the islet cells take over the pancreas and they, in a sense, help the pancreas produce its own insulin. So some people refute this because they say that this is still very new to science. There's very little research on this because it is so new, and because of this, we don't know the negative side effects because of how new it is. While I agree that it is still very new to science, and we don't know the negative side effects so far, it does have a remarkable potential to save lives. And stem cells have advanced what we know in the body, because in the 1900s, we thought with people who had type 1 diabetes, you were just going to have to do insulin injections. You're going to have to monitor your insulin. You're going to have to monitor your blood sugar because there is no way we can cure type 1 diabetes. Well, now we can use stem cell research and stem cell therapy to help treat and potentially help cure type 1 diabetes. And the risk is worth the reward if you don't have to worry about monitoring your blood sugar anymore. And then I'm going to talk about how stem cells help with human experimentation when it comes to drugs, mainly because it gives a more accurate prediction, and it can also help, stem cells can also help determine the toxicity of the drug that people are taking. So how it gives a more accurate prediction. Biological and biosimilar drugs are drugs that help researchers discover how the experimental drug is affecting the body. Now, biological drugs kind of act like the human immune system. It helps researchers discover how taking an experimental drug how will it affect the immune system in different ways, either a positive or a negative way. And then you have a biosimilar drug who helps with target therapy. Now, this has become a long way with cancer, because now it's more, these biosimilar drugs are used to target the cancerous cells and leaving the healthy cells alone, because it'll only target the cancerous cells, the one that are hurting the body. Another way is through induced pluripotent stem cells. And what this does is researchers take stem cells and they inject it into a living organism, and they see how the stem cells along with the living organism test well with the drug. And what this does, it can help test the complexity of the drug, how long-term effects of taking this drug will affect your body, how if you take this drug for 3 to 4 years, how it will affect your body in the long run, and it can help determine how much of the drug you need to use, and it helps optimizes the drug properties. So how it can help determine the toxicity of drugs. It can help predict cell-to-cell interaction while the drug is still in your system. Stem cells can also help determine how, whenever you're taking this drug, how the cells metabolize this drug and how fast the cells will react to this drug, and how the cells differentiate with the drug in your system. And stem cells can also mirror the body's immune system. So there was a study done in a college in Wisconsin where they took valproate, and valproate, what it is it helps treat epilepsy, bipolar disorders, and it can help prevent migraines. So what these researchers did was they took 3 different sets of embryonic stem cells, and they and they put a control group, the one that's given a regular dose of these embryonic stem cells were given a control group with the one who had the regular dose, and the other two groups had either a very high dose of valproate or a very low dose of valproate. And so what this helped determine was this the actual right dose that people should have been taking. And the results were that the embryonic stem cells who had the higher or lower dosage, the molecules in them were starting to deteriorate, and they were starting to react, and they started to lose concentration with the drug in their system. So the researchers determined that this was the right amount of dose that they were supposed to be giving out to their patients, due to the fact that embryonic stem cells were acting very differently than the control group was normally reacting to. So some people refute this because they say that embryonic stem cells have a high risk for rejection. There was a study done at the Stanford School of Medicine, and embryonic stem cells were given into mice, and these mice were, in a sense, going to be used to help test another drug. But because the mice were rejecting the embryonic stem cells, the tests were inconclusive because they couldn't get a valid reaction from the research. So they considered that because the embryonics were rejected within the first day, the test was not valid. While I agree that embryonic stem cells do have a high risk for rejection, it's worth the risk if it can save patients with a terminal illness and it can prolong the patient's lives. So if the patient can live an extra 4 or 5 years and get to spend time with their families, then it's worth the risk of taking a chance of the embryonic stem cells rejecting your body. So my third point is how stem cells are more cost effective than other treatments. And I'm going to focus on cancer and type 1 diabetes, which I brought up in my first point. So cancer treatments, the normal way we treat cancer is through chemo and radiation therapy. Now, normally whenever you do chemotherapy, you get injected with the chemical, and it in a sense kills all of your cells. It kills both the cancers and the healthy cells that normally you need to help fight off infection. So, and normally right after chemotherapy, you have to go into radiation therapy because they want to make sure that they've gotten all of the cancerous cells. So they make sure that you are completely 100% cancer-free. And this is normally how we've treated cancer and how cancer has been treated. But what's bad about chemotherapy is whenever patients get out of chemo and radiation therapy, they become a lot more susceptible to diseases, and they become a lot more prone to getting all these viruses that are out in the world because their immune system has been, in a sense, hurt by the chemo and radiation therapy. So it takes a lot longer for these patients to come back after chemo and radiation therapy because they're more susceptible to being sick and more susceptible to, in a sense, to getting some of these viruses that our immune system attacks and we don't have to deal with. And then there's the cost of cancer treatments. The normal cost for chemotherapy is about $11,000 to $12,000, and that's just for normally one session. And people who have cancer normally need more than just one session. So you're in a sense spending $24,000 to $36,000 on something that you do need. But there is another form of treatment that could, in a sense, save your life and can potentially help you heal a lot faster. And then right after chemotherapy, you have to go to radiation therapy, which is another $9,000 that you have to put out of it. And normally insurance covers it, but it doesn't cover that much. It depends on which insurance you have. So with stem cell treatments, it's only around $1,000 to $2,000, and you can go back to work a lot faster because you're not worried about your immune system, because the stem cells only can target the cancerous cells and not the healthy ones. So stem cell treatment's it's more cost effective, and it has a quicker return rate in a sense. And so type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is where your body no longer sees your pancreas as something healthy. So it attacks your pancreas and it damages your pancreas to where your pancreas can no longer produce the insulin that it's needed. So how we normally treat this is through insulin treatments, and that's either you take shots or you take the pens that you need to inject the insulin into your body to help monitor your blood sugar, or you can get the insulin pump, which also monitors your blood sugar and tells you when you need a dose for insulin. So the cost of insulin is about, for one vial, it's about $120 to $140 for just one bottle. And normally you need more than just one bottle a day. You need about 3 to 4. So for 1 year alone, it's about $10,000 of just for insulin, and not for the other stuff you'll need. Like if you wanted to have an insulin pump, that's another $300-400 that you have to invest in, which it is something that you need because it saves your life and it helps monitor your blood sugar. But with stem cell treatments, it's something that you wouldn't necessarily need because the stem cells could help heal your pancreas, so that way you don't have to worry about monitoring your blood sugar, because your pancreas can function like it normally should. Now, some people refute this by saying no, stem cell therapy actually is the one that's most expensive. Researchers have talked about how it is about $10,000 to get the full treatment, and how the FDA has not officially approved of the stem cell treatment. So you are putting yourself at risk because it's not FDA approved. While I agree that it is not FDA approved and you are putting yourself at risk, actually chemotherapy and radiation therapy are the ones that are more expensive, because they're actually $11,000 to $12,000. And the average cost for stem cell treatment is about $1,000 to $2,000. And because of the rapid increase of the stem cell clinics around the United States, the cost will most likely go down due to the fact that stem cell clinics are becoming more frequent into our society. So to review, I've talked about how stem cells have progressed from the idea of cloning to where it is now of more to help treat and help cure diseases. I've talked about how you don't need to have human experimentation when it comes to drugs, because stem cells can do it. It can do it for us. And I've talked about how stem cell therapy and stem cell treatment is more cost effective than other forms of treatment. So I'm going to leave y'all with a quote from Tom Allen, who said, "The stem cell research holds out the promise for finding cures and treatments for a wide range of diseases." Thank you. Hey, give me more water. Okay, questions?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Barely, but I can hear you.
Okay, great. First of all, good job. From a technical aspect.
Oh, thank you.
For me, one of the strongest things from a technical aspect was your structure. I thought it was very tight and very easy to follow, because this particular topic could have a tendency to go kind of everywhere. So I thought you did a pretty good job of reining it in and staying where you wanted to stay as far as your lanes, where you were going. My question, you make the statement several times that the reward is worth the risk. That's not necessarily, I'm not necessarily questioning that. I guess what I'm wondering, maybe just an observation, if we don't start using it, we never will get to the point where we know all the risks. Is that a fair assessment, or on the plus side?
Well, yes, it is a fair assessment, because, I mean, if you never use stem cell therapy or stem cell treatment, then you will never know what the risk is. I'm just saying that it's because it's so new. I mean, up until the 2000s, we really haven't used stem cells. The researchers haven't used stem cells for nothing else other than the fact that they could use it for the idea of cloning. So to say that because we haven't used stem cell therapy and stem cell treatments that much, we don't know the risk is actually a fair assessment, because I mean, we don't know the risk until we actually take the risk and, in a sense, get the treatment that you need. If that helps.
Yeah. Kind of the 600-pound elephant in the room on the stem cell research is the whole designer baby man playing God argument.
Yes.
And I find your selection of topic particularly interesting, because I know you have a very strong faith. So how do you, I guess, reconcile those two?
Well, I look at it as more, that's why I really didn't want to talk about the defining aspects of life, because I do have a strong faith, and I do believe that, children are a creation of God, and that all children deserve to be born into this world. But if they are going to abort the child, I say, if you are going to let your child die, at least let it go to something more resourceful, like stem cell research or another form of it. So that way this child's death was not for nothing. Mr. Allen.
Hey, Emily. Good job.
Oh, thank you.
Well done. I agree with Mr. Lawrence. I thought it was very easy to follow, and the slides really helped out a lot with that.
That was my biggest fear, was that it wasn't easy to follow, and I did overcomplicate it. So I'm glad I made it a lot easier to follow.
You did a good job with that. Did you see any, in looking at your research for adult stem cell treatment, did you see any information out there, material that were comparing the use of adult stem cells with embryonic stem cells, and from that, anyone saying, yes, this is a better option than this one? Or did you see that? And then what is your opinion? Do you feel like there's a better benefit to adult stem cell versus the embryonic stem cell?
Well, adult stem cells are the normal one that you want to go with, because you can get it out of your own body, and it's less likely to reject because it's coming from your own body. Embryonic stem cells, from my research, from what I've seen, now this could be different from what other people have seen. From the research I've noticed so far, embryonic stem cells have been used some for treatments, but mainly it was for the testing period. They were testing it on that, because adult stem cells are not hard to come by, but they were a lot easier. Embryonic stem cells were a lot easier for researchers to obtain than adult stem cells, because mainly you'd have to take them out, and the machine that it takes to cycle the good stem cells from the bad stem cells takes a good 4 or 5 hours to cycle it alone. So it's more of, embryonic stem cells were a lot easier to maintain than adult stem cells were. My personal opinion on the matter is, I believe adult stem cells are a lot easier to go with, because they don't have that risk of rejection, because they're mainly coming from your own body. So I would say, if I had to choose, I would go with adult stem cells before I would go with embryonic stem cells.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Emily. You really did do a good job.
Thank you.
I'm mostly aware of stem cells being used for cancer patients. Talk a little bit about what else it's used for, besides what, obvious.
So stem cells have been used for a wide range of things. It's been treated for, they've used stem cells for heart disease. They've used it for cancer, like I said. They've used it for type 1 diabetes. They've used it for asthma some. I know there are some researchers that are even trying to use stem cells to help produce their own liver. They're using it in a cloning sense to try to produce another liver, so that way we could take down the organ donor association, because normally you'd have to wait for a person to pass away and then get the organ that people need to survive. So I know researchers are looking into using stem cells for the purpose of trying to grow their own organ. Stem cells have been used to help treat trauma patients with people who have had like who've had a car crash and have back problems. I've known stem cells to be used to help treat people with trauma. Movie stars, I've seen a lot of where movie stars come in where they've broken either a bone or something, and they've needed stem cells. They've used stem cells to help heal the bone a lot faster, so that way they can go back to producing their movie or producing their TV show.
Okay, good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Emily, this whole issue of stem cells is a very conflicting one, because where is the tipping point where man becomes God? You know, you talk about cloning a new liver. Well,
mm-hmm.
I thought making a liver was God's job. You know, where does that argument lie? I don't know what the tipping point is. What is it for you, do you think?
I think my tipping point for me personally would be whenever they started to clone another human. That's when you're taking God's design. For, like I said, cloning like a liver, I don't think that they're trying to be God. I think they're trying to help society and help these people that have organs that are failing and help them to actually survive by giving them another organ, and another person doesn't have to die for those people to get that organ. They can use stem cells to grow it, and if it's functional, then it can help these people who unfortunately have this problem. They can now heal, and they can have that organ, and not at the cost of another person's life.
Good response.
That is a good response, because along with that, you know, it just begs the question, are we going to have enough ethical people to manage this? Because it does go so far out. So, you know, my prayer is always that some of you guys that graduate from Alpha Omega will go into those fields and be able to influence people. Because Emily, you guys have something that you see the world at a very young age in a much better way than most people would. And I think that's a really neat thing. I love hearing about your faith and that you draw the line, you know, that you draw the lines where you do. That's not
Thank you.
I'm just telling you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Emily, I know you've worked hard on this. It's quite evident. You've prepared well. You've articulated yourself well. I'm proud of you. That's a good job.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And if no one else has any questions, you can turn off the oven. Oh,
I think Miss
go
Cindy
ahead.
has one.
I forgot we
Hi.
had other viewers. Go.
Hi. Great job, Emily.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question. Do you know what the options are? Is that something where adults can donate cord blood stem cells as well? I know that they do not only embryonic, but also cord blood at the time of birth, but is it possible for adults to donate stem cells as well?
I honestly, I did not research enough into that topic. I would assume that they would accept it with open arms, especially because many people wouldn't want to normally donate, nor would they want to, because it is a very lengthy process. You have to be healthy, and you have to meet the certain requirements. You don't need to have you don't need to have like hepatitis or something that would affect the stem cells in a whole, and then they'd have to put the stem cells into the machine that would cycle out the good and bad stem cells, and only to then again save but I think that they would. I don't see why they wouldn't want a person to. It's kind of like a person that people would refuse to donate blood, who people are like, no, we don't want your blood. I would see it more like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
I was just going to echo what you said, Mr. Lawrence. Emily, I appreciate you following this all the way through to the very end. I know we've asked a lot of the students this last quarter, and this right here was just another, it was another big ask and of you guys. And so following through, we are proud of you guys, and know this hasn't been an easy end of the year for the senior class. So thanks for all your hard work and being doing such a good job today.
All right, thank you.
Well, put a bow on this sucker and call it a wrap.
Well, that's a wrap for day one.
That's right. Well, for you, it's history.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, Emily. Thanks. I enjoyed that quite a bit.
Thank you.
All right. We'll talk to you guys later.